Arsenal scored 91 goals last season, the second most in the league. This campaign, they're on track for just 70. That is a shocking 21 goal drop. Mikel Arteta's tactics see his most creative player not creating chances, the goalkeeper is playing more long balls, and their build-up is so predictable. He's completely transformed this Arsenal side into a structured, disciplined machine. But in the process, have they lost their attacking edge? Has Arteta's tactical evolution actually weakened Arsenal's attack? Season by season, what has Arteta changed? And are Arsenal actually going backwards? So, Arteta, Pep Guardiola disciple, right? So arriving at Arsenal led people to believe that the style would be reflective of Pep's tactics at the time. But it didn't work out exactly like that. The 4-2-3-1 had some of Pep's elements at the time, but also it lacked significant ingredients. A Pep element we did see was the focus on half spaces, with Ozil and Lacazette, two central players picking up the ball in wide areas, often looking to create overloads to allow the wingers to receive the ball in advanced positions. But there was a problem, not only on the pitch, but also within the club itself, a problem that would not only shape Arteta's leadership style, but also would shape the future tactics of the team. And that was control. How is Arteta going to replicate the level of dominance for his own team instead of being on the receiving end of it? Arteta's first season saw his side create less than 20 shot creating actions per game. And so as we take this journey through the evolution of Arteta, remember that is the lowest it's been during his time at the club. I'm not for a second saying that Arsenal haven't improved under Arteta. So why was it at its lowest? Well, Arsenal top scorer in that season was Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang with 29 goals. And to this day, that's the most goals an Arsenal player has scored in a single season under Mikel Arteta. So how come it was their worst season in terms of chance creation? Mesut Ozil was Arsenal's most prolific chance creator during the 1920 season, but Ozil only featured 10 times for Arteta in the Premier League. And the struggle for dominance and goals was not only visual on the pitch, but also in the stats, with Arsenal ranking 13th for XG created. But with that said, you could still argue that this was the most successful season in Arteta's tenure because of one aspect. And this came down to a tactical change made from Arteta, one he probably didn't want to even make, using the players he probably didn't want either. And that change was morphing to a back five. This was the lineup that won them the FA Cup in 2020 and their last major trophy. It's safe to say that this back five, it didn't last long, but it did give Arsenal success. Perhaps there were lessons to be learned from it. You'd be surprised, but some aspects of Arteta's tactics from that 2019-20 season actually remain today. This game against Manchester City took place 5 years ago, but these two principles have never left Arteta's Arsenal attacking approach. The 4 A's, I like to call them. And these are both of the goals that they scored. One is an in-swinging cross from Nicolas Pepe to the back post, and here is the exact same move from this season's game against Southampton. The other remaining tactic is a funneled vertical ball to Aubameyang, who's stretching the Man City back four. And, yep, you guessed it, lo and behold, here is the exact same thing in a pre-season game last summer. And so although these aspects remain, has Arteta improved the rest of the attack? Talk to me, guys. How do you feel about it? Because some, they feel a bit confused by his tactics this season. But before that, let's see how they've developed further over the years. In his first full season, Arteta seemingly wanted to address one big thing: the volume of passes into the final third, and it worked. Kind of. Before the season even kicked off, you could see that Arteta's plan was to strengthen the spine of the team, bringing in Gabriel and Partey in the summer. But similar problems were still evident. Arsenal improved their open play shot creating actions, for sure, their goal creating actions, and even their XG per 90, but they still didn't look quite right. They were losing games that they had control in, but they were also struggling for that midfield dominance. And the final straw, I believe, was a 4-1 defeat to Manchester City. And this defeat was arguably a defining moment for the Arsenal that we see today.
It's a really hard result to take, but as well we have to look at things that can help us for the future.
It was the last time that we'd see the 5 at the back system for a while. And what happened? A 4-game winning streak with an aggregate score of 8-1. That extra body in attack and a change to a 4-2-3-1, it became the way forward for Arteta. But it was more than just about having the extra body here. It was about having increased dominance in different zones of the pitch, and we began to see the first evolution from Arsenal, with Smith Rowe drifting wide, allowing Saka to move inside, whilst you had Hector Bellerin penetrating the space, creating this triangle, and it led to this Saka goal. But just 32 days later came the catalyst for change that Arteta had alluded to. 5 syllables, 1 golden jawline, Martin Odegaard. And on Arteta's 448th day in charge of Arsenal, it finally felt like we were seeing the plan, with Odegaard playing a big part in it, because this was the day that he scored his first Premier League goal. But also, crucially, it was the day where his inclusion in the team helped shape the tactical approach of Arsenal and the future of the club. The shape was appearing and not many picked up on it. But this was one of the key moments that saved one player's Arsenal career, in fact. It was a change that would create a future Arsenal hero, but that wouldn't appear for another 12 months. And when it did, it would shock 99% of Premier League fans. So what new tactics from the 2020-2021 season have stuck? Well, the move from a back 5 to a back 4 has been a permanent fix, albeit for the occasional tweaks. It was also in this season that we saw the beginning of the blossoming partnership between Odegaard and Saka that we have come to know and love. The gooey centre of the sweet Gunners at their best, I'd say. 2021-22. Now this 21-22 season, it truly, it confused me. On paper, there are massive signs of progress, but the feeling at the time was overwhelming failure. And that feeling of confusion was perpetuated when Arsenal spent big for the first time under Arteta. The jawline that was Martin Odegaard comes in on a permanent, spending big on Ben White and signing a newly relegated goalkeeper. Well, that doesn't sound impressive. But he was, wasn't he? But also, how did the £60 million unknown centre-back turned right-back Tomiyasu transform Arsenal's attack that season? This passing network from the 3-1 victory over Aston Villa answers that question that I just asked myself for the purposes of the video. Now, firstly, Tomiyasu is deeper than Nuno Tavares, which is by design. This allows Saka to remain high with the safety blanket of Tomiyasu behind him. But the crucial part of this passing network is how few passes go from centre-backs into midfield. Arsenal tried to play around rather than through by playing a large volume of passes to Tomiyasu. And by consequence, he had a big role in progressing the ball forward, making the second most progressive passes of any player in the team. And this became an incredible tool for Arsenal in terms of being able to work the ball down the sides of the pitch, but also to create chances. And within the space of 3 passes, Arsenal got themselves a goal without playing a ball centrally once. And crucially, they played it with high tempo and directness. The tempo is a reason that we made this video, and it's something that we need to investigate further. We're going to go deeper, guys. Are you ready? Well, a stat that proved this was the average passes per possession. It went down in this season, but possibly for the better. That season ended on quite a bitter note, with a defeat to Tottenham leading to Arsenal missing out on top 4. Of course, you will all remember that painful moment, Arsenal fans, or joyous moment if you're not an Arsenal fan, I guess. But with a key moment of the season being Aubameyang's shock departure from Arsenal. It was a player that had scored 38 goals for Arteta and had signed a bumper deal, hadn't he? So how do you replace that level of output? So from this season, one element that remains a key component of Arteta's tactics today is the focus on having the ball playing right back. That year it was Tomiyasu, this year it's Ben White and Jurgen Timber. In the final game of the season, we saw the next phase of Arteta's attacking plan fully take shape, and it was fascinating. Because in that game, we saw how these tactics would lead to real tangible success. And most notably, Granit Xhaka, now converted from a holding midfielder to an attacking 8. This change led to the left back being slightly more reserved. This tactical tweak would go on to lead Arsenal to success, and in the 2022-23 season, we saw exactly why. So in that 22-23 season, Arsenal scored 24 goals in the first 10 games, averaging 2.4 goals per game. It was a huge jump from the 1.6 goals per game that they averaged the season before. Now, a big part of that was the change in midfield. The dual 8 system, it gave Xhaka the redemption arc he bloody needed. And this is how. Xhaka was having far less touches per 90, but was more effective in attack. And despite having significantly less touches overall, he nearly tripled his touches per 90 in the penalty area in this new system and essentially became the 5th attacker in Arsenal's system. Something that would have blown and infuriated Arsenal minds just 12 months before. And it was his lack of on-the-ball presence that allowed him actually to arrive late into the box from Saka's in-swinging crosses. His role was diverse. For example, his application and build-up allowed Arsenal to invert Zinchenko, forming triangles like this on the left-hand side. And this allowed Martinelli to provoke the space in behind without coming short for the ball. Xhaka had become Arsenal's great facilitator. But also in this instance, 15 seconds later, Xhaka could be seen being that box presence, giving Arsenal increased dominance in the opponent's box, which they had craved since Arteta's first season. And we saw the biggest jump for goals scored by Arsenal under Arteta. But there were other components in this attacking system that allowed Arsenal to flourish for the first time under Arteta. Odegaard, Martinelli, Saka, and Gabriel Jesus all reached double figures for goals in that Premier League season. There was a freedom and a confidence to Arsenal when attacking. Saka here makes a progressive carry whilst Martinelli and Nketiah both target space in behind. This created space for Odegaard, which is something that we've lost, I think, from Odegaard recently, and we'll touch on this soon. But in this instance, he shoots unapologetically and scores from distance. The confidence to do it, but also the guile, the ingenuity, the freedom to hit it and not overthink it were crucial for Odegaard in this season. He scored 15 goals in this campaign. That's his highest total to date. 2022-23 was a pivotal season for Arsenal tactically. The Xhaka role, it was so integral, and it has remained a part of the system, even if Xhaka's output itself has not been replaced. Declan Rice has been given similar license to progress from holding midfield to attacking 8 with solid success. We have also seen this year similar wide triangles being created between the fullbacks, centre mids and the wingers. But despite making these huge leaps forward from an attacking perspective, Arsenal were stopped in their tracks by a formidable Manchester City team. So now the question was this: what was missing to win the league? And how were Arsenal going to cope with their secret weapon Granit Xhaka leaving the club? 2023-24 season and the transfer window left us with more questions than answers. First question being this, of course: was Kai Havertz truly the Xhaka successor? It felt like it might be. They scored more goals this season, you know. But when you dig a little deeper, it's not so simple, because their goal-creating actions from open play went down. And their goal-creating actions from set pieces, yep, significantly rose. So why did Arsenal begin to create less from open play? Let's start there. Let's take a deeper look at it. Because in this season, Arsenal were averaging more passes per possession, but less passes into the final third. Why? Well, the key word here is tempo. The Wolves game was a prime example of it. Arsenal averaged 6.68 passes per possession in this game. And the tempo of their build-up play was crucial. Short passes leading to Arsenal slowly progressing the ball into the final third. But let me stop you there, Jimbo, from 2 seconds ago. Let's zoom in on Tomiyasu, shall we? Now, earlier we highlighted how the onus was to play a progressive ball into the wide area. But a year on, his first action is to look inside to play a backwards pass to Saliba rather than gamble with a forward one. That's okay, but it is a different approach. Arsenal completed 77 progressive passes in that game. But apart from Odegaard with 8 passes into the penalty area, no other Arsenal player made more than 2. The style, it was very calm and indirect. It was psychological warfare. Back to that season, because Arsenal broke their scoring record in this season. They've scored 4 against Bournemouth, 5 against Chelsea, 6 past Lens in the Champions League, 5 against Palace, and even 6 past West Ham. And they were able to achieve this without even having a 20-goal-a-season striker. In fact, Gabriel Jesus only scored 4 that season. Now, part of this came down to Kai Havertz and how he accidentally found himself playing as a striker for Arsenal when everyone thought that he'd be the left-sided 8 and started the season in that role. And despite Arsenal having an increased focus on tempo, there was still elements of freedom to it. And this gave Odegaard exactly what he needed. Here he's drifted into the left half space to receive the ball, whereas usually you'd expect to see him in the right half space. And this off-the-cuff moment, it allowed for progression quickly. Kai Havertz's willingness to make these runs in behind was a big part of that telepathy between the two of them. And despite great moments of open play chance creation, and this being Arsenal's highest scoring campaign with 91 goals, they only ranked 6th for open play expected goals. They did, however, develop a secret weapon: set pieces. Now look, Arsenal's set piece brilliance has been spoken into the ground. We all know they got a new set piece coach in 2021 and it gave them a vital new weapon by the start of 23-24. So much so that year they were the only team to hit 20 goals from set pieces. And therefore it would be silly for them not to stick with this tactic in 24-25, and stick with it they did. We also all know that it has become a bit of an over-reliance for them this year, but more of that in a moment. They've also retained the slower progression of the ball into the final third via short passes. It may have worked well last year, but in 2025, it has brought a lot of criticism from the fan base. But there is an element of psychological warfare here. Ole Einar spoke about this on Inside Scoop, great channel with Harry Pinero, recently talking about what it's like to play against Arsenal.
Arsenal's thing is like, it's so hard to explain because like you have to just be on the pitch, but when they're passing it, it looks like they're just doing side to side and that, but they're like they're probing, there's balls in behind, like flicks and stuff, like players are just changing positions constantly, bro. Me, playing against Arsenal is one of the hardest though, one of the hardest, bro.
And what he means is, psychologically, you are being broken down by Arsenal these days, and it's shown in the stats, because the running stats show that you will never have to run less than when you play against Arsenal. But the question is that lack of penetrative threat down to injuries, or is it down to not having a bona fide number 9, or is it that over-reliance on being brilliant at set pieces and subconsciously leaning into it? And that brings us to this season, where personally I feel like for the first time it feels like Arsenal haven't leapt forward like they have in previous years. Let's see where we've come from tactically to get to the current system then. Because this year, Arsenal have predominantly played with a 4 at the back formation, with ball-playing fullbacks, a midfield that is consisting of a holding midfielder, 2 roaming 8s, wide wingers, and a striker. They make wide triangles of interplay, and they like to progress the ball up the pitch slowly together through a combination of short passes. Odegaard and Saka have still got that important dialogue, but with Saka out, we have seen the role filled by Ethan Nwaneri. And of course, Gabriel is still pumping headers in from set pieces. Now, while that may seem clear enough, Arsenal have confused me. They have, because there are tactical elements that I'm struggling to understand. And there's a few reasons for that. This graph of shot creating actions per 90 left me with more questions than I started with. Firstly, look, I understand injuries have played a big part in this drop-off, but some aspects of this they still confuse me. Let's look at someone who has been one of the main protagonists of this video so far, Martin Odegaard. Odegaard's creative numbers have dwindled this season, and when he's the main creative focal point of the team, that has to raise alarms. And this needs to be investigated with one word in mind: approach. Odegaard has the ball here, and the obvious pass is a lateral one to Timber, but Odegaard turns the other way. The obvious pass becomes Declan Rice, or one into the space out wide, but again, he delays it, allowing Man United players to get back into position, and after one more turn, he plays a 5-yard lateral pass to Partey. So what's the problem with Odegaard? A player that I absolutely love. I love his intensity, I love his leadership, I love his desire, I love his technical ability. His struggles, is that on Odegaard, or is it Arteta instructing him to slow down the tempo by not taking risks? Or maybe not even wholeheartedly instructing that to him, but subliminally with the desire for control that Arteta likes in his team. You saw comments from Declan Rice and Arteta talking about we were doing things we shouldn't have been doing when they were looking to win that game against Manchester United very recently. That again says to me that that desire to control is the priority. Because bear in mind that we've just witnessed multiple instances of Odegaard taking risks and having success from it. Has he become a robot? Not literally, metaphorically. Arsenal had 68% possession, but struggled to create consistent chances due to delaying passes and slowing down the tempo. Is that slowing down of the tempo, is it due to hesitancy or a lack of confidence right now? Because to make it even more confusing, how did this team that struggled to create score 7 goals the game just before this? Well, let's take a deeper look at that. This is a good example of what they can do, but they don't do enough. Miles Lewis-Skelly has the ball in an inverted position, but you can see that Rice's role as Xhaka's replacement is still visible, with this triangle being formed to create space on the left. The crucial part is that Lewis-Skelly passes it forward early and with purpose, causing displacements in the PSV defence and gaps in their midfield. Now, look at the volume of players in the box when Trossard gets the ball. The idea is not to pin PSV in their own defensive third, instead it's to flood the box to allow for a ball to be played in. And that's brave play when at 0-0 in a Champions League knockout match. We can see how the left-sided 8 role still has a crucial part in the way that Arteta wants to attack, with Rice receiving the ball in similar spaces to Xhaka, then crossing it into Timber to make it 1-0. This is what Arsenal are capable of when they don't go overkill on tempo and control. But there's something that we've skirted around and now it's time to address it. Because this was Arsenal's front three against PSV. Raheem Sterling, a winger, fair. Mikel Merino, a box-to-box centre midfielder. And Kieran Tierney, a left-back who has been playing as a centre-back at times for his country. For me, the big thing here is a lack of risk. I think Arteta wants to control what's going on right now, and with the injuries that he's had and the lack of trust I believe he has in his attacking assets at the club right now, I think he's gone down that control process route and maybe gone just a little bit too far, to the point where it's now hurting his team when they can't win a game from a set piece. They've probably got more points than they would have done if they'd been wholeheartedly open like an Ange Postecoglou. But some players in this Arsenal team need some freedom, and Martin Odegaard in particular, as a loyal soldier who's willing to work hard, is working just that little bit too hard. And he's now not seeing the game the way that he has as a outrageously talented player who's able to play professional football as a 16-year-old. He's seeing it how the gaffer wants him to see it. And that's causing him to become snowblind, in my opinion. Because sometimes the pass is there, just play it. And so that improvement from an open play attacking viewpoint has plateaued. There's two types of speed. There's physical speed and there's speed of thought. A lot of the players in that Arsenal team are incredibly intelligent players, but their speed of thought, like a computer with too much on it, means that it's processing constantly. That great Arsenal side that were popping about, they were playing with speed because they were playing with flow, because they weren't over processing. This team right now, and in particular its supposed creative players, are doing exactly that. So that brings us to where we are now. Arsenal's tactics have evolved so much over the years, but the important question now is, what do they do next? What will the future of Arteta's Arsenal look like? The answer is a name that not many outside will have heard of, but soon you all will know the name, Andrea Berta, the man tasked with solving Arsenal's attacking problems this season. The new sporting director of Arsenal operates unlike anything we've seen at the club over the last 2 decades, famed for bombastic signings that not only cost a lot, but usually turn out to be great signings. But it's risky. But maybe that's exactly what Arteta's team needs. Berta's approach is that he doesn't mind spending big money to get the correct names over the line, which is exciting yet terrifying for Arsenal. Will they get the striker that they so desperately need? How much will that cost? And what if it doesn't work? Does that set them back? The last 5 years have seen significant change and, in my opinion, significant improvement. But has it got them to where they want to be top of the tree, to win the league? Well, in the recent draw against Everton, despite only coming on in the 75th minute, no player created more chances in the match than Arsenal's Kieran Tierney, and Arsenal have now drawn more Premier League games despite leading this season than any other side. So no, Arteta hasn't got Arsenal to where they need to be, yet. And no, they're not going backwards either, yet. But this next summer is going to be a sliding doors moment for Arsenal, which could see this iteration of the club reach its full potential or lose momentum and begin to decline. One thing is clear, Berta's influence and Arteta's next tactical evolution will be the make or break for Arteta's Arsenal.